Good afternoon, everybody. We're so happy you joined us for our Honors in Action Hallmark Award webinar. We're really excited to talk to you about some of the changes and some of the things that are going on with Honors in Action, and to talk to you about best practices for submitting Honors in Action Hallmark Awards. We have some wonderful presenters joining us today. My name is Susan Edwards. I'm not one of the wonderful presenters, but I should have said that after I said I'm Susan Edwards. I work with Phi Theta Kappa as the Associate Vice President for Honors Programming and Undergraduate Research. Now for the wonderful presenters. We have Dr. Patty Hall, who's with the Beta Zeta New Chapter at Kenyatta College in California. The Beta Zeta New Chapter was the 4th finalist to the Most Distinguished Chapter in 2019. And Patty also serves as a technical workforce representative to Phi Theta Kappa's Honors Program Council. Also joining us is Dr. Mitch Stimers. He is with the Beta Eta Xi chapter at Cloud County College's Geary campus in Kansas. His chapter won an Honors in Action Hallmark Award last year and is featured, as are the other presenters' Hallmark Award entries in the 2019 edition of Civic Scholar, Phi Theta Kappa's Journal of Undergraduate Research, so you can check it out. Mitch also serves as the STEM representative to Phi Theta Kappa's Honors Program Council. And last and certainly not least, we have Jenna Santacroce. Jenna serves as the International Vice President for Division 1, and she is a member of Alpha Epsilon Phi chapter at Bergen Community College in New Jersey. Alpha Epsilon Phi was 2019's most distinguished chapter in the world, and we're really excited to have Patty, Mitch, and Jenna with us because they're going to share in a few minutes some of their best practices as it relates to academic investigation, action and collaboration, and impact. So we're going to start, now that we've done welcomes and introductions, and talking a little bit about Honors in Action, and here's the outline for the webinar. We'll talk about the purpose of Honors in Action, look at some Honors in Action basics, talk about some Honors in Action Hallmark Awards changes for 2020 entries that you will be submitting in January. We'll talk about some winning Hallmark Award projects and some tips for Honors in Action Hallmark Awards, and then we'll talk about some writing tips and deadlines. Questions and answers. We also have joining us today Phi Theta Kappa's Associate Vice President of Program Implementation, Jennifer Stanford, and she is personing our chat session today. So if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to write those in the chat box in the webinar, and Jennifer will be answering those questions. And then when we get to the very end of the session, we'll also open the floor for questions, and all of our panelists will be able to answer those. So let's get started with the purpose of Honors in Action. Honors in Action addresses the second part of Phi Theta Kappa's mission, and that's to provide opportunities for college students to grow as scholars and leaders. It's important because, of course, it is the purpose of Phi Theta Kappa, but it's also important in the Honors in Action Hallmark Award entry process as well. Because if you look at Honors in Action, you want to remember the purpose to provide those opportunities for college students to grow as scholars and leaders. When we come back to looking at impact, you want to really pay attention to whether you've done that, how effectively you've done that, and have the ability to explain how you've done that. So let's look at some basics. Honors in Action, if you're brand new to Honors in Action, it fulfills level 5 of the 5-star chapter plan. So working on an Honors in Action project and submitting your Hallmark Award entry, which is the last part of an Honors in Action project, will help you fulfill that 5-star level in the 5-star plan. Phi Theta Kappa's biennial honors study topic is the cornerstone of Honors in Action. And so if you haven't already done so, check out the 2018-2019 Honors Program Guide, which introduces you to our honors study topic, which is transformations, acknowledging, assessing, and achieving change. We've got the URL for you on the slide, so if you go to ptk.org and look for the Honors Program Guide, it's a really great place to start, and it's a great place to go back to as you're working on your project to make sure that you're working with the correct theme for the honors study topic, and that you've got your ideas set as you're working on your academic investigation. Now, in terms of the timeline for honors and action projects, you can work on your honors and action project anytime between January 1st and December 31st. All honors and action projects should be finished by December 31st. And because these are projects we're working on in 2019, that's December 31st, 2019. And then last but not least, I mentioned that Patty's chapter and Mitch's chapter and Jenna's chapter are all featured in our 2019 edition of Civic Scholar Phi Theta Kappa Journal of Undergraduate Research, along with 13 other award-winning honors and action projects. We have the URL on the slide. We really recommend you to go and take a look at Civic Scholar and take a look at those projects. You'll see there's a wide variety of things that chapters did and a wide variety of approaches that chapters took to their academic research and to connecting their research to their action. And you'll get some really good ideas about what you might do or how you might fashion them in your Hallmark Award entry. So let's talk about some changes. The 2019 honors and action projects on which you're working are actually submitted for 2020 honors and action Hallmark Awards. That's not meant to be confusing at all. It's just that those awards will be given out at the 2020 PTK Catalyst in Grapevine, Texas, and at your 2020 regional conventions. So here are some differences for this year. We think that you're going to be really happy about these. They're going to really help clarify the process and the Hallmark Award entries. So the first thing we did is we separated research objectives from action and collaboration objectives. It's really important to have both. And so you'll see that they're in different sections of the honors and action rubric. And you can take a look at those and make sure that you've developed objectives for both parts of those honors and action projects and entries. We also have defined research conclusions and research outcomes. So we've put that into the rubric as well, so that when you're working through trying to develop research conclusions, you know very specifically what those are in the rubric and then what we mean by research outcomes that are tied to those research objectives. So take a look for that. Those are in the rubric. Then we know we've had from last year that we want full formal APA citations. They're really important. And so take a look. We've got some nice resources online about how to fashion APA citations. If you aren't familiar with those, you also certainly are welcome to work with people on campus who do know APA citations, and they can help you with that. And yes, the citations count for the full 2,600 words, but you want to make sure that you have done full citations and just plan your entry with that in mind. And then if you look at the presentation rubric for each of the sections of honors and action, we've added quality of writing to the section so that we are looking at spelling and grammar, but we're also looking at the quality of writing and the clarity of the writing. Now, optional this year for the first time, chapters may attach up to 3 total tables, charts, or photographs that illuminate your honors and action research or action. So it's 3 total. Any of those things that really help enhance your entry are eligible this year. And then just one more basic that I want to talk about, and then we're going to move on to best practices. Honors and action entries are judged on 3 main categories. So academic investigation, which is where we begin honors and action projects, action and collaboration, and impact. And if you notice with the rubric, and we've given you the URL there, academic investigation is worth 34 points on your honors and action Hallmark Award entry. Action and collaboration are 33 points, and impact is 33 points as well, for a total 100 points. One thing I want to mention is that if you look at academic investigation, you'll see connections to academic investigation in the action and collaboration parts and impact parts of the honors and action Hallmark Award entry and the rubric. And that's because the honor study topic and your academic research is the cornerstone of honors and action. We want to make sure that you have worked with that and really have shown in your Hallmark Award entry that what you've done and how you've done that. So we again have our wonderful panelists today, and we're going to talk about some best practices with Honors in Action. We're going to begin with academic investigation, and Dr. Hall is going to start us off on our conversation about best practices. Patty.
Great, thank you. Hello, PTK. Now, transformations, acknowledging, assessing, and achieving change. That's pretty big. Who thought that up? A whole bunch of us get together and think about these topics and then the themes within them to provide a rich framework for you to build your research on. And what we do at Beta Zeta Nu, which has been very successful, is we use that honors study guide. During spring semester, the chapter sets up a digital place to store their meeting notes, research notes, any kind of media that might be of interest or might support over time. We just put all of that into a Slack or a Google Docs. We've also used Canvas, our LMS, our learning management system. And we organize these resources in alignment with the Honors in Action planning and judging rubric that Susan mentioned. So at that time, we begin to think about the study topic and review each theme. We've done it in two different ways. One, we've identified students who will go out and read the theme and do some research, read some of the literature, and then present it to the chapter. And the other way is the students invite faculty experts in to present the themes to the chapter. Last year, we used the first way, where the students went out and looked at themes. Our chapter then became very interested in three different themes, but it was difficult to sort of narrow down those interests. And the way they narrowed down their interest was by participating in local, regional, and statewide PTK events. They used the ptk.org website, the resources, the webinars, and they networked among other chapters about what they were interested in, how they had done their projects in the past. So last year's officer team got their ideas from workshops at Honors Institute and Catalyst on the power and utility of understanding behavioral economics and big data. These were topics they hadn't really thought about prior, but they felt that these topics fit very snugly into the dynamics of discovery theme. Since we had several econ and business majors in our chapter leadership group, they were really excited because the topic, they felt it could benefit them in their transfer and their career goals. And so then during chapter meetings that spring, we brainstormed ideas. Once we decided on the topic, we began research and we met with our research librarian. Don't forget to use your local resources in every step of your project. There's a lot of brain power in our chapters and advisors are awesome, but it's really important to go outside of your chapter to find the resources on campus. And your research librarian should always be your go-to for starting your research project. So we established research objectives and we learned how to conduct research in the field that we were thinking about, behavioral economics. Now, behavioral economics is a pretty new field, so it wasn't super easy to find a lot on it, but the research is very current and very interesting. And they came to think about using small nudges to change behavior in large groups of people. And I'll talk a little bit more about what we did with all of that. But students read from primary sources. They interviewed current researchers and practitioners in the field using the nudge behaviors to change outcomes in public programs. And they looked particularly for conflicting viewpoints. People out there who were doing research or just had opinions that said, oh, this is all bunk. Students gain a lot of value from finding those alternative and conflicting viewpoints. All along, they keep adding materials to their Dropbox or Google Docs, and they begin developing their annotated bibliography using APA citations. And this is really important because by the time you get to the end of the project, you're super tired and you don't really want to go back and figure this all out again. So having those documents and resources archived in your digital format is really important. In the past, we've often recommended journaling. Our chapter has been much more effective at just using those digital spaces as filing cabinets. Thanks.
All right. So, hi everybody. I'm Jenna. I am going to provide you with a little bit of a different perspective coming from a student who has never done an HIA before and doesn't really know much about what it is. Also an undergraduate student who's studying environmental studies. I've never conducted research on my own, so this was a new experience for me, and I'm going to walk you through how me and my peers took this challenge. So one important lesson that I learned throughout this process was sometimes it's necessary to let your research lead you. What we started with was we read through the honors program guide. A good tip is to always refer back to that honors program guide throughout the entire process because it'll help you stay on track and make sure you're staying on topic as well. So we chose the themes that interest us most, and then we divided into 6 research groups. So we dug a little deeper in each of the groups, like whoever was assigned to which groups. And one peer of mine suggested that we watch the film Alive Inside, which was a film she had recently watched and thought it related well to theme 5, which is channels of creativity. So after watching the film, we were all brought to tears. We were so touched by how music was able to resurface memories in Alzheimer's patients and so intrigued on how the effect of music alters the brain just in general. So another thing I've learned was that if you're going to devote so much of your time to a project, make sure it really, really interests you and get excited about it too, because that's really the foundation of a successful when you're excited. So of course we wanted to know more, so we did some further research and we learned that music has been scientifically proven to reduce the effects of anxiety in patients, and all genres are tested, but classical music had shown to be the most effective. So another peer, through our research and our long, extensive discussions, another peer of mine mentioned that ASMR media has been known to do the same thing, which is reduce anxiety in listeners. So for those of you who don't know what ASMR media is, it is soft, non-threatening sounds, usually formed at the front of the mouth, like P's and T's. Most of the time people whisper into microphones to induce ASMR media, or also like the crinkling of paper or like foil kind of creates this head euphoric feeling, which is chills all the way down your neck and your spine. It's supposed to be really relaxing. So we thought that was really cool that classical music has been scientifically proven to reduce levels of anxiety in patients, and ASMR media was a new trend that has been said to reduce anxiety. We did research and saw that there really is no scientific data to support the fact that ASMR media reduces anxiety. So what we decided to do was create our own scientific data. Literally, that's what we did. The sky is the limit. That's another thing. Just be boundless, but also be realistic. But when you're deciding on your topic, make sure you be boundless, because it might surprise you what you're capable of doing. So for us, it's really fun, and it holds weight if you bring in lots of very current trends too. So that's another thing. Yeah. What about you, Mitch?
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So we take a slightly different approach than has been mentioned by Patty and Jenna. We, of course, sit down and do brainstorming and hold a couple different workshops. In fact, this go around, we did 3 workshops before we really kind of settled on a question. And then a few weeks later, we jettisoned that question and started over. So it's really okay just to ditch your question and take a different direction if you think you want to. And that's part of academic investigation, I think, in general. But we discussed the topic overall. So we spent about a half hour, 45 minutes or so the first session talking about transformations. And then we discussed the themes just to get them familiar with the themes, but we don't work directly from a theme. We look at what our question might be first. And of course, we start really broadly and then kind of narrow that question down to a really good research statement that, of course, should be flexible a little bit. And then from there, we add on what themes might be possible, and then we'll kind of narrow that down to one theme later on. And a really good way to start academic investigation, once you get a good research question, of course, that's got to be based on what you're really interested in again. But once you get a good research question, a really fantastic way to start is have them start looking for what's already been done. just look in the literature, and I would suggest looking for peer-reviewed papers to start with. And of course, those can be a little bit dense. Start with the abstract, the intro, and the conclusion, just so the student can get a feel for it. Some of those can be 20, 30 pages long and hard to read. But what you want to do is look for, kind of what's been done. In Jenna's case, they did something that hadn't been done, and that's great. But there's certainly research that's connected to that or of the same type. Once you get research or a good stack of research, have them write annotated bibliographies. And I think that's a great way to introduce them to what a peer-reviewed paper looks like. And I'm going to touch on that again when we get to the impact section. But that's a really sneaky way to get them to do something that I'm going to, again, I'll mention later on. And as Patty mentioned, utilize your LMS. If you use Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, or whatever you use, go talk to your IT department or whomever it is that manages your LMS and see if you can get a course shell specifically either for HIA. We use a course shell here to manage all aspects of the chapter, so I have a separate module for our HIA project. And that really helps investigations stay focused and stay on track. Meet often, and I give them assignments. I sort of treat HIA kind of like a class in that we have regular meeting times every other Friday. As we get closer to writing, we'll probably meet more often, but I treat it like a structured class with a set date, a set of dates, I should say, and times that we're going to meet, and those are listed in the LMS just like a course would be. The dates are listed there, the time, everything is listed there. And I also, like I said, I give them assignments. So before the next meeting, here's what I want you to have done. Add an additional annotated bib. Look more into how you might collect that data. How might we design the survey, or whatever the case may be. You really want to get them focused on moving from one step to the next. Otherwise, I think this can be a massive project that can really confuse students as to what to do. And I mentioned survey work. In our work from last year, the students designed and distributed a survey. So if you're going to do anything along those lines, and I noticed in the chat there's a question about citing personal experience or personal interviews. If you are going to do anything dealing with human subjects, you of course have to use IRB and get IRB approval. Not all of your schools will have IRB, and if you don't, you could visit a nearby school or college, and a lot of them will be amicable to letting you use their IRB for that. Susan?
Great, thank you so much, Mitch. Now, with Honors in Action, academic investigation is the cornerstone. Of course, it leads to the action part of Honors in Action. So Jenna, will you please tell us about your chapter's action and what led or what came from your academic investigation, and then a little bit about your collaboration as well.
Yes, sure. So our research took up most of the summer. So when we were creating a concrete plan, we needed to make sure that we would be working efficiently moving forward, because we wanted to make sure we would finish in time and definitely have enough time to write about it as well. So looking back now, one thing I'd strongly recommend is to schedule in time for obstacles. So the action and collaboration section of this project is where you'll definitely cross some tricky tasks. So leave room for error, leave room for mistakes. They're natural, they're going to happen. The last thing you want to do is rush your writing at the end of it. So after we did create our concrete plan, which was to study the effects of both classical music and ASMR media on human brains, we knew we were going to need some help because we're all undergraduate students. This was most of our second year at college, and we have never conducted research before, and we admitted that we were a little bit in over our heads. So we turned to professionals. Take advantage of your resources. So professionals both within your school and within your community are most likely willing and excited to help you. Just make sure you give them enough time. This was one of the obstacles for us. We failed to realize that our HIA project wasn't other people's top priority like it was ours. So they took some time to get back to us, and it set us back a little bit. So that's just a good lesson to learn. When you're working with other collaborators, make sure you give them lots of time. So we partnered with the STEM department at our school. We got really lucky that year. They just got a new grant, so we were able to utilize the EEG machines that they just got. So they taught us, the students and the advisor taught us how to use the EEG machines. They sat in with us for a while when we were using them. it was an exciting project for them too, not just us. So in order to work with human participants, we had to get certified by the National Institute of Health. So by law, we were able to work with human participants. So that was something that we had to do as well. We turned to the math department on campus to make sure we were setting up we wanted to conduct a double-blind study to effectively eliminate the placebo effect. And we didn't know how to do that exactly, so we turned to the math department for help. And then, of course, once we had the scans, we had no idea how to read them. So we had to reach out to EEG companies to learn how to read the scans, and then a local neurologist to learn how to analyze them. It's okay to not know, that's where other people, you have to utilize what you have available to you. And yeah, don't be afraid to reach out, because people are most likely really excited and willing to help. Who's next? Patty?
I think that Patty, yes.
Thank you, Jenna. Those are great pieces of advice. And I don't think you can ever get too much advice on how to do this. That transition from doing your research and reading research articles and thinking deeply about a topic is really enticing. One of the important things to do is figure out when to stop your research and identify your next set of objectives, your collaboration objectives and action objectives. So our chapter decided that they wanted to join forces with specific student success programs across a variety of populations, including the Bridges to Opportunity Peer Mentorship Program, international students, their own chapter, middle college, high school students, STEM center students, pre-med students. They wanted to reach out to a large number of students to help complete their project. And because they were looking at using nudge theory to help students become more engaged in student success activities, they thought it would be important to reach out to all of those groups. So they spoke with the faculty and administrators and asked for access to those groups. Then their action objectives, and it's important that the chapter create research, action, and collaboration objectives, because that's what we keep going back to as a touchstone. Are we on track with our project? Let's look at our objectives. What do we want to accomplish? What's gonna help us accomplish our goals? So their action objective was to implement a series of nudges that would increase student participation in activities designed to increase student success, and then to share those findings with students, faculty, staff, and administrators so they could transform the way they reach students to be more effective and increase student engagement in success programs and campus resources. Now, we've all heard a lot about how much challenge community college students have in completing and transferring, and our students were particularly interested in making a difference. Many of them worked in the tutoring centers. Many of them saw how students would struggle. And what they decided was to dream big and try to make a difference, but then it's important to be realistic. So what Jenna said about giving yourself enough time, it's really important to give yourself enough time to be successful. Mitch uses his learning management system to help students. Those would be nudges. And you can figure out all sorts of things like shared calendars, but it's important to leave yourself enough time to be successful. Use your community. In the past, our chapters used the community law library, the ACLU, and local business leaders. And then in accordance to the objectives, they sought out all these organizations, brought them in, and created cohorts. And once they found the cohorts, they started to implement the nudge activities. Thanks. Off to you, Mitch.
All right. Thanks, Patty. Patty covered action pretty well and a little bit on collaboration. I'm just going to expand on collaboration a little bit here. So one of the things that I think is important when collaborating with other chapters, or if you happen to have a four-year near you that's an R1 or a bigger research institution, is trying to collaborate with them, but trying to get out into the field. It's probably not possible in every project to do primary research, and there's certainly nothing wrong with doing secondary research or a lit type review, but if possible, I really want my students to get out and into the field and do something primary like Jenna's chapter did. So if you have that 4-year that's near you, you can start by just simply going to a department that is aligned with the project or the research statement that you've already come up with, and either make contact with some of the instructors or professors there, or look at their CVs that are probably posted on their page or something along those lines, and just look and see what research is being done there. Now, that's not to say you want to piggyback off of their research and just help them out and then write your project based on that, but there's probably opportunity there to look and see what they're doing and if you can branch off of their research a little bit. And what that also helps set you up for in terms of collaboration is having that outside resource, and you certainly want to use your resources within your school if you can, and you should be able to, but that also sets you up to have, perhaps experts in the field that are tied or aligned with your topic that you can go to. So as I said before, and Patty and Jenna both mentioned, collaboration involves, I think, holding workshops. Now, whether that's you directing the action, if it happens to be in your wheelhouse in terms of academia, or if it's going out to other schools, other instructors, or even community members or government officials, if you're going out into the community and you're looking for people to help you out with your project, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think the collaboration concept is really great in terms of getting students to understand, the big buzzwords, of course, that have been part of academic research for decades now, and that's interdisciplinary research. I think it's important to get them used to that right off the bat. And again, just treat yourself sort of as the ringleader. It's not out of place, I think, for us as advisors to sit down with them and teach them how to do something. As Jenna mentioned, you're not going to go out and have students that know how to do every single thing that aligns with that research project or statement they've come up with. So teach them how to do it. And Susan?
Great. Thank you, Mitch. And I do want to make a comment, because Mitch is absolutely right. Advisors, I know we have a number of you online today. You are not to do the project, but you should serve as coaches, because remember, part of Honors in Action, the purpose is to provide opportunities for college students to grow as scholars and leaders. And I usually will use my alma mater, Clemson University, as an example, but I'm going to use the Houston Astros today. Go Astros. They're all professional baseball players, and there are lots of great ones on the team. But A.J. Hinch, the manager, doesn't just say to them, "Hey, it's your team, go out and play." He's coaching them, he's managing them to help you. And we would hope that you will do that as well for students, and that helps them grow as scholars and leaders. And Honors in Action is important because you can have an impact on the world, on your local communities and your colleges and the world. And Mitch is going to talk to us, start us off talking about the importance of impact and how you can measure that with Honors in Action.
Sure. And thanks, Susan. So recall that when we were discussing academic investigation, I'd mentioned annotated bibliographies, and I have my students do that for 2 reasons. Number one, because I think that lets them know obviously what's been done in the field, but they can look at the results and discussion section of peer-reviewed journals, and they can see how impact relates to the research objectives. So having a project without research objectives is kind of like, I think, that the villain in the movie that puts the cinder block on the gas while the car's in park and then puts it in drive. If you have a research project that is, objectiveless, it just doesn't have any direction, that's going to be kind of a problem. So in terms of looking at what you've done earlier in the process with annotated bibliographies, that's going to really give them, I think, a good way to see how they need to describe their impact. So if you look at how peer-reviewed journals are typically broken up, you have the intro, the lit review, the method section, which is going to be, for our work here, the describe your academic research into the honor study topic. That's what they're doing, and that's how they did it. The analysis is going to be more where the impact comes. So here's what we found, and here's how it was impactful. And that really has to be, a narrative. If you have more quantitative data, then of course you have to describe what the results of the experiment were or the data analysis were. And if you have a more qualitative project, then that's where you get into more of a narrative from the start. But either way, your description needs to be a narrative as to what the impact really was. And we just learned this right before the webinar, so you learned it kind of right along with us, that we get to put graphs, charts, and photographs up to 3 in our research now, and that's really exciting. My students are doing a data-driven project this year, and trying to explain what a chart looks like is a completely different thing than actually being able to include a chart. And if you're, again, doing something that's not data-driven, you may be more inclined to use a graph or a photo, but in terms of describing that impact, now we can discuss it and describe it visually. So I think that's really great. So the other thing to keep in mind when you're discussing your impact and going through writing up that narrative is, are you addressing and responding to the objectives that you set? So again, you need to have someone kind of driving the bus, and that should be your research objectives and your action objectives. But when you get down to the results and discussion section of a journal article, you're always going to find the author or authors summarizing how their work met their objectives. Because if you're not doing that, you're not closing the loop on that research. You're really just leaving it out there. Did they meet their objectives? Did they not meet their objectives? It's like an academic soap opera. So you really, really need to have that loop closed. So it's very important as you're helping your students with the writing portion, make sure you're constantly reinforcing what were your objectives? Did you meet them? And how was your work impactful in terms of what you really set out to do? Susan?
Hey, thank you, Mitch. And I think Jenna is going to talk a little bit about what her chapter did in terms of impact.
Yes, Mitch, I agree 100%. If your objectives really do help you stay on track, so make sure you're, following them. It's easy to go all over the place while doing these projects because they're big projects, so make sure you're sticking to your objectives. So also, one thing that I want to say is, if you don't see the results that you were looking for, you didn't fail. You just found something different. So for my chapter specifically, we were looking to prove something that we didn't prove. And that's okay too. We still got substantial results. So there's a fundamental understanding that I need to explain before sharing our actual findings. So ASMR media and ASMR are two different things. So ASMR media is the soft sounds like I was talking about earlier, the S's, whispering, and the crinkling of the paper. Where ASMR itself, which is autonomous sensory meridian response, that is the actual feeling. That's the actual chills that you get on your spine. So what we found, we were looking to prove that ASMR media induces ASMR and therefore helps reduce levels of anxiety in listeners. But what we actually found was the type of ASMR media that we chose to use in our project had no significant results of reducing levels of anxiety. But we did find that other sounds were able to produce that ASMR feeling. So the classical music that we used was able to induce ASMR in patients. So because people have self-reported that ASMR media has helped them reduce anxiety, our findings of other sounds, not just ASMR, typical ASMR triggers, being able to induce that feeling broadens the whole holistic approaches to combat anxiety. So that's a big finding within itself. We didn't expect to find that, but we did. And we didn't fail at all. We actually kind of exceeded our expectations for ourselves. So the reason why our college project was so impactful was because it resonated with our team, and it also resonated with other college students as well. We almost all of us battle stress and anxiety and get super overwhelmed. So that's why we chose to do it in the first place, is because we related to it, and we wanted to help other kids be able to combat it as well. Really, what HIA is about is just giving your findings back to the community, and that's what we did. So we shared them in a panel with our participants. We invited our participants back to a panel and shared our results. We shared them in the school newspaper, reaching our whole student body, which is like 14,000 students. We competed in a conference as well with other four-year universities. So when we took this project that we did for PTK and brought it into other competitions and conferences as well, because we were really proud of it, and we wanted to share it, and we wanted to extend our outreach with it. At the end of the day, we really created the most comprehensive study on ASMR media to date, and we did that as community college students with no former experience in research, and that's pretty cool. And this project is your chance to do the same. So the sky's the limit. Oh, and also one more thing I wanted to add was, I think this is really important for us. It was never about winning Most Distinguished Chapter. I can speak for myself and some of my closest friends. We didn't know that Most Distinguished Chapter was an award until we were sitting there at the gala that night when we won. I remember I looked at my advisor when they were counting down from 10. I knew people were getting awards because at our regional conference we got awards as well, but I thought it was more of just, I didn't know it was super, I didn't know that there was like first in the world. So when we were at the gala, I look at my advisor, I'm like, why are they counting down from 10? What is going on? And then we won, and I was like, oh my God, we won. So it was never about winning. If that's your main goal, then you're setting yourself up for disaster. Have your main goal being about being impactful and something that you're passionate about. You know, if winning is just the cherry on top.
Thank you very much, Jenna. And Patty, will you please share?
Wow, I'm not really sure I can add anything to that. Thanks, Jenna. I can talk a little bit about our project because in some ways it was different. When Jenna mentioned the size of your chapter, it really comes down to the group of people who are participating that makes it or breaks it. And although we have a lot of members in our chapter, there was a very small group that led the research and led the activities that followed it. So after concluding 5 nudges involving more than 300 students and reaching their variety of student population, the chapter concluded that accessibility to workshops and face-to-face communication provided the most effective nudges. The most successful nudge brought a 12-fold increase to student attendance at the on-campus workshop. During the time that they were organizing their nudge experiences, they had to modify what they were doing, and they made these modifications with the help of a behavioral scientist. They were realizing at first that their nudges weren't making a difference. They thought that perhaps if they could text or perhaps if they offered food, they had used sort of ideas that they had in their mind. But what they came to was that walking around and saying peer-to-peer, hey, come by right now and participate in this workshop on finals, being successful in your final, that made a huge difference. And so their action, they had an action plan, but they were open to changing it as they ran into roadblocks or experienced successes. So they shared their findings with over 20 campus programs and every student club. They collaborated with the student government so that the student clubs could have access to this information that they had produced. And then they shared it with the faculty and administrators. They also included key success groups like the Dreamers program and other programs for first-generation students that didn't really have access to success activities as much as other traditional students. So the chapter concluded creative and comprehensive data based on behavioral economics and big data, implemented the nudge, worked cohesively as a team to create and modify objectives, to overcome obstacles. They encouraged chapter members to participate in all phases of the project, and we actually found that many participants or many student members came in and out during the process. Another challenge that the chapter faces is if you start in the spring, you have a very different group of officers by the end of the project. Again, reference back to that digital archive of materials, important to get that going, but it's also really useful when you bring new people in as the semesters change. So the importance of the findings was shared across the campus, and the way the project was written up by the chapter members helped the reader understand the impact of their project on the campus community. Thanks. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you to all of you for sharing your chapter's best practices. We have a couple of more things to share, and then we'd love to answer any questions that you have for as long as we have remaining. So you've heard Patty and Jenna and Mitch talk about how important it is to get organized. So some tips that you've heard and some additional ones. Make sure you have a communication plan that from the outset, or if you don't have one yet, from the point you are now with your Honors in Action Project, get everything together so that you have material, you've been keeping track of it all along, and so when you get to the point where you're going to write, organize, write, and edit your Hallmark Awards, you have the information at your fingertips. And we have some Google Docs and Microsoft Teams and Dropbox, I'll just go that way, some types of ways you can organize your materials. Make sure that more than one person has the material. Make sure your chapter advisors have access to the material as well, so that you've got a team that has access to it. Make sure you've got roles and assignments. You want to have note takers throughout the project. That's very important because you want to have that detailed information. It's so hard to remember, months later what your motivation was or why you made the choices you had. So make sure that you do that. You want writers and proofreaders and editors, and this is really important as well. I know Patty and Jenna and Mitch all talked about some incredible projects on which their chapters worked. And writing up the Hallmark Award is really that last step in the Hallmark Award, the Honors in Action process. But you want to get your best writers on assignment. You want proofreaders who are great detail people who will notice all the mistakes, and we all make those mistakes. So make sure you have someone who's a great proofreader. And then you want to spend an enormous amount of time editing, making sure that you are writing what you mean and that it's clear to people who are reading it. We like to say, get those Hallmark Award entries to people with the rubric, but people who are not just tell you how wonderful you are, but who are going to look for the rubric pieces that you need to have there, and whether you're communicating well and whether they have a strong sense of your Honors in Action process. You want to get the people who are going to be very specific and hopefully not harsh, but maybe on the scale of things toward the harsh end. That's the way to get those Honors in Action Hallmark Award entries in really great shape. Remember always, as you review the rubrics and you write and you proofread and you edit, that the Hallmark Awards belong to the chapter and to the college, that you're putting your chapter's best foot forward and your college's best foot forward, and they don't belong to the individuals who are doing that part of the writing. So think of yourselves as a team, even as you're writing and you're editing Hallmark Award entries. And then develop a timeline. Make sure that you've got deadlines for the first drafts and later drafts, that you've got your editing sessions set up, and that you've got proofing sessions so that you know how you have to organize and when you have to organize. And I mentioned that because if you look at the very last bullet point, Chapter Hallmark Awards are due on Thursday, January 16th, 2020 by 5 p.m. Central Time. So you want to make sure that you get your Hallmark Awards entries in on time, and that you are not looking to click that button at 5 p.m. Central Time on January 16th, because you don't want hundreds of chapters doing that and having things slow down. You can set up your Hallmark Awards, submit your entries, and you can always go back before the deadline and make edits as long as you've got those submitted. So ptk.org/hallmarks. There are lots of resources. There's lots more information for you. Advisors, you can report your Hallmark Award delegates, the people who are going to physically work on your Hallmark Award entries, online. And so you can go to ptk.org/hallmarks and do that. And then the entry forms are going to be available this fall, so you can look for those. Check out that email. It's my.ptk.org, so it's a little bit different. You do sign in to work on your Hallmark Awards. And again, January 16th by 5 p.m. is the deadline for Hallmark Awards.
Susan, I think one thing that we didn't cover too extensively was the life cycle of an Honors in Action project. And I noticed in the question, in the comments, there was a question about that. all chapters do it differently, and sometimes it depends on what your enrollment and your induction cycle is. Phi Theta Kappa Beta Zeta Nu, our chapter, we tend to start the investigation of the topic and the themes before the spring events, Catalyst, Honors Institute, and the regional conferences, because we found through the past years that those events are really instrumental in getting new students to think about things. So I know that that's a lot of planning, and some chapters can't quite get to that. Then we do research over the summer and into the fall. That gives us a lot of time. We mostly do our college project during the spring semester, but this like investigation happens at the same time. Some chapters start right at the beginning of the academic year and do their honors and action project in those 4 months. It really depends on your local resources, and it's a good idea to kind of play around with it. What's comfortable for the advisors? What's the environment at your college? But there have been successful chapters that do it in a myriad of ways. There's no one way to do it, but it's easy to fill it into the whole year if you plan and you use a calendar like Jenna and Mitch had recommended.
Thank you, Patty. And we do have a couple of questions from Natalie. Will there be a new honors program guide for honors in action? Will you continue to use the 2018-2019 guide for this year? You continue to use the 2018-2019 guide. We are actually in the process of editing the 2020-2021 guide, and so that will be out in January. But for this year, continue to use the guide that we have now, and the topic is still transformations. And so we applaud your use of that work. And I saw earlier, and I know Jennifer answered the questions, if you look at the current guide, the citations in the guide are not strictly APA citations. We apologize for that. When we actually printed the guide, there were some space issues, and so we didn't do it in the APA format. The 2020-21 guide is totally in the APA format, so when you see that in January, you're going to see formal APA citations. So we also have a question about how did your chapters, Patty, Mitch, and Jenna, how did you organize the honors in action entry and writing process?
Well, I'll go ahead and take it if you two want to jump in. So last year I reorganized our, I reorganized our bylaws, and I created a position that was specifically a vice president of Hallmark programs. So that person is in charge of making sure the teams get the writing done on a schedule that they devise, and then they kind of run by me to make sure it makes sense. But it really goes back to meeting quite often. You can give them assignments to do as you're doing the research, but as you come to do the writing, I think that really has to be a collaborative process. And of course, you can do that remotely with Google Docs or OneDrive and just be working on it as you can as individuals. But I think it's really important to foster a team environment to get them in the same room and working on the document together so they can just throw ideas back and forth off each other. And then as the copy editor, either if that's you or the English person or somebody else in the chapter is going to do all the editing, that can be done separately. But the writing, I just think, is important to be cohesive when you're working on it. It's hard to keep it in one voice if you're working on it in disparate parts.
Yeah, excellent. We really encourage that. And Jenna, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to bounce right off of that actually directly. So before we mentioned size of groups, and don't get discouraged if you have a small chapter, because one of the chapters in top 5, I think it was maybe the 3rd chapter, that one, they were a group of 3 students. My group, we had a lot of board members, and that can be a good thing, but could be really difficult. So as far as the writing, I was laughing when the person asked this question because the writing process was kind of a painful process for us. We were all in the same room, like Mitch was saying. We were all working on it. We actually would meet up on the weekends at Starbucks. But it came to a point where there were too many ideas, and it was just too many different writing styles and too many different things being thrown into our Google document that we learned the hard way. We wasted some time. Well, we didn't waste time because we got a lot of great ideas out of that, but we learned the hard way that for the final writing process, we had to narrow it down to our 3 best writers, and that's what we did. So myself and 2 others, that we went into the room and we wrote, and then we had a few other people who were really great at edit, and a few other people who were good at generating ideas do that. So the actual physical writing was 3 people towards the end of it. So as you're filing down, it might be best to get fewer people working on that final document, so you have the same voice, because the quality of the writing matters too. The clarity is really important. It has to be concise, but the quality is important as well. So yeah, big groups can be difficult too.
I think the way Jenna mentioned too, size of chapter, we had 4, and we ended up with maybe get into Civic Scholar also. So don't be afraid if your chapter is really small and think that you can't do a big project. Size and scope of projects surely can lead to some big conclusions like Jenna's chapter has displayed. But I think, you get a small dedicated group of 3, 4, or 5 students, you can accomplish the same thing. It's really just all about the quality of the work that you advise them to do and guide them through, but that they ultimately do.
Yeah. And the process is really long. Make sure you give yourself enough time, because
yeah, really perfect. And I can say, and backing up what Mitch and Jen have been saying, that Honors in Action has been the great equalizer when it comes to the Hallmark Awards process, that in fact all chapters can do a great Honors in Action process, and we've found that as we've looked at the chapters that have won Hallmark Awards, and we're really happy about that. We have a couple more really quick questions, and I think I can answer these. There was a question about whether APA citations and the annotated bibliographies are part of the 2,600 word count. The answer is yes, they do count. They still need to be formal, they still need to be full, but they are part of that 2,600 words. And I think it's a really good thing to mention that 2,600 words sounds like a lot of words until you start writing. And then usually trying to get down to the best 2,600 words is the tough part. That's why you want to spend time editing. And I had a question about whether we would answer questions about if a chapter is in the right theme and they're working toward their Honors in Action project. And yes, we're happy to answer that question. The only thing we really can't do is read your Hallmark Award entry before you submit it. Other than that, this is not meant to be a secretive process. We want to help. We want you to be doing your best work, because remember, this all goes back to Phi Theta Kappa's mission to provide opportunities for college students to grow as scholars and leaders, and we're here to help that process. So thank you all for being here today. Let me say thanks to Dr. Patty Hall and to Jenna Santacroce and to Dr. Mitch Stimers for being with us today and serving as panelists. We so appreciate you sharing your expertise on Honors in Action and the Hallmark Award entry process. Thank you to Jennifer Stanford, who was really good about answering questions as I saw the numbers rising in the chat boxes. She was great. She was right on it and answering those questions. We really appreciate her help in doing that. And thank you so much to all of you. We appreciate your interest in Honors in Action. We appreciate the work you're doing on campus and in your communities with Honors in Action. And we really look forward to reading about your Honors in Action adventures in 2020 and to celebrating those projects that you've completed at your regional conventions and at PTK Catalyst 2020.